But thank you all for joining. This is our Women Energy Network Colorado chapter's last industry educational series. We did 4 this year that were fantastic. So I feel like wrapping it up this year with Project Canary helping us host this event is going to be a really good ending to the season. So the educational series is going to be focused on differentiated gas, or in other words, responsibly sourced gas. This is a topic that's gaining traction across the global energy markets, and we definitely thought now's a good time to talk about it more, get some education out there, and kind of put this out there before the end of the season. So we are very lucky to have Project Canary hosting today. All 3 of the panelists here have extraordinary backgrounds, and they're very much so leaders in the industry at the moment. So we'll kind of go down the flow of Liz will present first, then Michelle, and then Jessie. And so each one of them will talk about each different divisions that they're involved in. Just first, a quick bio. Liz is Project Canary's Director of Business Development. She has 17 years of experience, 7 years at CHK, 7 years at Weatherford Labs, and most recently to support the Department of Energy at AWS. She's a single mom that has lived the past 8 years in the Highlands in Denver. Probably has seen a lot of change in that area. When she's not mommying or mitigating methane, you can find her in the boxing gym every weekend. So awesome. We'll hear a little bit more from Liz here in a second. Michelle, she is the Senior Director of Policy. Michelle has spent 20 years working for natural gas and electric utilities. In many roles, she has been in many roles, including engineering, pipeline safety, regulatory affairs, and she has found her passion where science, policy, and people intersect. And now she runs the public Canary policy for efforts and for all 50 states. So large background there. Can't wait to hear more on the policy sector. And last but not least, Jessie. She's Project Canary's head of utilities. She has 15 plus years in the energy technology, and a huge believer in tech-enabled decarbonization. So that's pretty much a lot of what we're talking about with transitioning in these energy sectors, a lot of technology heavily based things. She also is a U.S. Naval Academy graduate, has her MBA from Boston University, executive certificate from MIT in artificial intelligence and business strategy. So as you could tell, these women come from very powerful backgrounds, and we're so lucky to have them talk. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and Liz, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Awesome. Okay, I'm in the same room as Michelle, so we're just making sure that we're not double mic'd and killing everybody with our acoustics today. But thank you for the sweet introductions. We were so excited about today. I think, one thing that you're going to hear from us today, we're so passionate about our mission. We come from different sides of energy. I come mostly from upstream, but we're all so happy to be part of this bridge from how things were once done to doing better and moving forward in the future. And not only have I been completely, fall in love with the Canary mission, but I'm equally as obsessed with all these women from Canary that are on this call as well. So whenever you get to work with people you really love with, it makes it that much sweeter. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate. But as Des mentioned, we're going to move through today. I'm going to talk a little bit just about these overlying themes and how everyone is leaning into these ideas of ESG strategy, or what is RSG and what does that mean. Michelle is really going to lean into the policy portion. I feel like we are so lucky to have an amazing policy team that not only looks at changing regulations on a federal level, but a state level, even down to the county level now at some points in California, and how important that arm is. And then with Jessie, one of the best parts of what we do is we're just not focused on our upstream operators or our midstream companies. That total value from what we do, it takes the entire value chain. It takes having a deep understanding of what buyers are looking for, how utilities are changing, how we're working with commissions, and so much of that is education. So you really need all of those pieces to move forward and help put together all these crazy pieces of the puzzle. It's a complex problem. It's not a cookie cutter fit where we'd all on this call have it all figured out, but partnering and working backwards from where people are trying to go is our guiding light. So we all on this call love this first slide because these are the drivers. Like, this is the why. If any of you have been in a room and you talk about, 10, 15 years ago in industry, we were not talking about our ESG strategy, or how we were quantifying methane, or even how we fit into compliance. That has changed. And there are different drivers that we see, these buckets of why we've been led to work with our partners today. I covered Canada as well. And so the past 6 or 7 months, it's also given us a lot of opportunity to see what are those drivers in the US and even specific states like Colorado versus other parts of the world. But a big one for us in the US is investment. And so when I say, when we say investors, what does that mean? If you're at a private company, there's now what I love to call an ethics to investing. We see equity partners say, hey, before all 10 of you were funded to drill in the Permian, now I'm asking you, what is your ESG strategy? How are you differentiating yourself and committing to a strategy where you're doing better and you're setting yourself apart? Access to capital is another one. And even if you're working for a large public company, you're always answering to someone. So even those shareholders, those members on your board, this is still, we're going to use that term, it's a voluntary market. Some would say moving into a compliance market, but we'll hear from Michelle soon on that one. But right now, this is how you're differentiating yourself. And if it's a way to get access to capital, that's a huge driver. Regulation, I'm not going to talk about too much because Michelle is going to cover that one. But again, it's very important to understand, what's coming out with the IRA on a high level, but also what are some of those things that affects operators even here in Colorado and how we bridge with that one. As an operator themselves, that branding of what is our story and how do we share it has become increasingly more important. For some people, they're doing it for the deal. We'd love to see if we can get a premium, and Jessie's going to talk about how that fits with utilities later. But for some, it's about how do we have that sophisticated social license to operate by leaning into ESG in this space. And then Jessie will also talk more about, again, those end consumers. There was a time where even 6 months or a year ago, our phone was not ringing off the hook from LNG companies. And now there is more of an interest, even if someone is not directly partnering with any of us to buy something. It's, what is this? What is that process? What is that impact? And then who's doing it? Can you tell me who's leaning into this space? So I didn't want to, we can get as nerdy as we want to, I feel, on this call. So feel free to ask any questions, but wanted to give a snapshot of when you lean into the space of continuous emissions monitoring, which is where we are. There are a lot of options to get closer to understanding what your methane intensity is at a facility level. And we really encourage flyovers, satellites, and now we have a suite of sensors, whether it's ours or someone else's, that you can lean into with mid or high fidelity sensors and what that impact is. So I just want to show 2 examples. One is an on-site leak, and the second one is, what does it look like if you look at a dashboard for an off-site leak, and why are those so important? So this first one on the top, that's your elevated methane concentration from our sensor, and you see a persistent alert. So we help our customers set alerts that say, okay, I'm going to pick on you, Maria, because I love you and you're in the audience. Maria, what is that threshold that you want your team to receive? When do they receive a text when this is out of a threshold that fits into your KPIs and where you want to take action on a fugitive emission? So there's a persistent leak, and we can tell from the wind data. So that second line in blue, that's your anemometer data. So looking at those together, we can see, okay, there's a problem. We talked, it's a shared responsibility model that we discuss what's going on. And by June 1st, you see that it's mitigated, which is the ideal outcome. That's what we want to do. And then the second one, this is an offsite emission. These are important because, especially when we're going to talk about as regulation changes, part of this is taking accountability for leaks or any emissions that you yourself or a producer are emitting. But the other part of that is, what if you were butted up on a lease line and there was a leak and it was right here and our sensors pick it up? How can you also have a defendable, a data-driven decision that says these are actually not mine? So this is an example of, you see an elevated methane concentration, and based on that wind data, when we look at that together, this was an example of a broken pipe, but on someone else's property. And some of these sensors are they're so sensitive. We picked up things like a dead deer on the other side, all sorts of crazy stories, but you have data that you can see is yours or not. Is this monitored by the operator or your team? So an operator does not purchase our sensors outright. They're rented, so we own setting them up, we own any repair, but the data is the upstream or midstream companies alone. So that is your data where we can also see it. Let me know if that answers your question. I hope it does.
Yeah, that does. That was helpful.
Good. And then I think one word that you will hear constantly thrown around in the space right now is quantification. And I bet Michelle is going to touch on that, as we define things like empirical data, we talk about the measurement economy. These were estimates given for years and years and years to the EPA, and now we are required to actually give measurement and take accountability for what that is. And the fantastic part is there's so many ways to do that. That's a possibility. So quantification is the cutting edge of how do we understand total site emissions, meaning those very large impactful ones we hope you never have, that you don't expect, the medium to medium ones, and the tiny ones that for so often don't get accounted for, but they still count. So now we use the same sensors, different algorithm. It's a machine learning model. And what it helps us do is take in all of those possibilities of wind data and generate plumes. So on the bottom, you see the strength of that plume from a site, and we pare it down to grouping of equipment. So maybe I can't say, hey, Callie, it's exactly this tank or exactly this wellhead, but you'll know, okay, the green right there, that's our bad guy, this week. That's our tanks, and we can get on the phone and send someone out to that area of the facility. So all of this, again, is to drive operational excellence, whatever that is, whatever your goals are, and to help do that at scale. Because if it's one thing I learned, even on the operator side, and definitely at Amazon and AWS, if you can't apply a solution at scale, it's not really a solution. And then when we talk about data, it is overwhelming for so many people to start in this space. More data doesn't always mean better. And so this is a snapshot of, you receive a lot of this information from a dashboard that shows elevated methane concentration, or how long did it take, what was that time to mitigate that leak. So we do quarterly business reviews, and we'll ask someone at the very beginning, what are you looking for? What is it that your leadership team, your board, your shareholders are really looking to define? And we help work backwards from that. And this is an example of an operator that took 6 months of data, and we could go back and say, okay, February and June, that was higher than other months. Your average elevation was 2 to 3 ppm. And the one that I love is the count alerts by root cause. So if you interact and you make annotations, we can go back and say, this is how many were expected, this is how many were not expected. And then you have a running tally, quarter over quarter. So again, this is showing a deep understanding that data, a million notifications that things are going wrong, it's very overwhelming, and we understand that's an issue. And this is one of those ways we try to fix it and work backwards from it. And then this, I think this is my last slide before I hand it over to the wonderful Michelle. Even when I started at Canary, we were very proud. We have some amazing high fidelity sensors. And in the last year, we've bridged and branched out in what we represent. So we have a partnership with a slightly lower fidelity sensor with Sensorion, their Nubo, which is amazing at scale. It's a little easier on the pocketbook. We have our Canary, which is where we started with high fidelity data. That's where we lean into quantification. And with Iris, which is a company Jessie might touch on, but that goes down to parts per trillion. It helps us speciate other gases. So I always joke, same reason I have 20 black dresses in my closet. You need one for every occasion. We feel the same way with sensors. It's not all one size fits all. Not all wells are at the same point on a decline curve, and becoming more technology agnostic. So now we're leaning into building out APIs with aerial and satellite sensors and saying, listen, if that is the data that you really want to bring into your world, we'll help build that into our software. And this is all really just a very important piece of the puzzle to these other things we're going to talk about, like policy and the crazy world of RSG. So this is a piece of it that's important, but we understand that it's a very big pie we're trying to work in. Okay, Michelle, all you.
All right, we're gonna attempt to do this switcheroo with speakers and whatnot. So policy. So someone might ask why a company like Project Canary has a policy team. And the answer is that we have found that having a seat at the table, whether you are talking about federal policy, environmental policy, state laws, county commission rules, it matters. And if you don't have a seat at the table, laws, policies are likely to get enacted that you don't love. And not to say that Project Canary is out there pushing our own laws, but we've recognized that having that seat at the table and being able to talk about the work that the industry is doing, the good work around watching our methane emissions, catching fugitive emissions, really taking ownership of what we produce, really makes our industry viable into the long term. It definitely started from the standpoint that there were policies being made that were anti-gas, and really galvanized us to understand that in order to support our industry, be effective, and ultimately, play a role in this, policy is key. And I believe that we are seeing that full throttle across the board. And you need no further example than last night was election night. And energy is on the minds of people across the country. And we saw that in governor's races, we saw that in legislative races at the state level, we saw it in Congress, and we are seeing it at county commissioner levels, folks who are really considering rules around how oil and gas can operate within their community. And so one of our major goals is to find what we call the harmonization of methane measurement. We will talk a little bit at the federal level, and we'll talk a little bit at the state level. But at the federal level, what we are seeing right now is people approaching methane in a variety of ways all across the spectrum. Many folks are familiar with the Inflation Reduction Act that passed Congress not too long ago. While that had a boatload of tax cuts and support for all areas of energy, it had some really key provisions for oil and gas. Most of them tied to Subpart W and how we are going to report our emissions. But the key piece there is that it directs the EPA to have a further rulemaking and really looks at the role of data, empirical data, and accuracy in our emissions reportings. So as many of you know, historically, we have used emission factors. Those emission factors were a great stand-in when we didn't have the technology to be able to truly measure data, but we have that technology. And Project Canary is one of many, as the amazing Liz noted in her last slide, that plays into that. There are so many pieces of technology that can help us to understand what's going on in our systems. All of them play a role. All of them are data. And so really moving towards the measurement moment, really moving towards how we can have a real understanding of what's going on, and then how that's also reflected in our policy and in our laws. The other piece that's really interesting is it affects royalties. And we saw this in BLM's waste prevention rule. Historically, if you have drilled on BLM land, you have always paid a royalty on what you've produced. Now they are changing that rule in a rulemaking that should be public very, very soon, by also requiring the producers to pay royalties on emissions. And so what that means is that you have to understand what you're actually emitting. We've already talked about EPA a little bit. There are several rulemakings going on and more to come that will have a large conversation around what it means to directly measure and what emissions data should be. And similarly, we're seeing the SEC's climate disclosure rule. This is a really interesting one and comes back to the reasons that we see action in this space. The financial market is looking at ESG as an indicator. We have a lot of friends in the production side that are taking these steps because their investors are really interested in ESG goals. And so the SEC is going down this path. How that ends up in any of these, we really don't know yet. These rulemakings are ongoing. They are in depth. There is a tremendous amount of folks that are filing comments on all sides of this issue, but it's something that we follow, we monitor, we pay attention to, and we think it's important. We also know that there's a U.S. methane emissions reduction action plan and a global methane pledge. So not only is the United States really taking action at the federal level, we are seeing it echo across the globe. We're seeing this in LNG exports. We're seeing this in the European Union right now as they contemplate what energy and what the idea of methane imports means to them as individual countries and collaboratively as a group of countries. The federal government is not just a policy setter, though. They are also a procurer. And I am stepping a little bit ahead of Jessie, so I'm going to highlight this and we'll move through this quickly. But when you do produce gas in a way where you can show that you have a low methane intensity, and by methane intensity, I mean methane emitted over volumes produced, you can have what's called a responsibly sourced or certified gas product. It's the methane intensity in collaboration with environmental attributes that you can have evaluated and you can score based on a set of, in our sense, it is data points. We look at how you operate and how you affect air, land, community, and water. We believe that by moving to certified gas, someone like the federal government, who procures a lot of gas on an annual basis, could make a significant impact in the environment. I'm going to hold it there. I know Jessie's going to come back to this. We can come back to this later. I also want to really speak to the states. What's really fascinating right now is while we're seeing leadership in this area at the federal level, we are also seeing this occur in the state level. And what's really concerning is that at the state level, we are seeing it happen in a variety of different ways. So some states are really approaching this through legislation around flaring and venting, or methane detection, or primacy. Some states are thinking about hydrogen hubs. We have public utility commissions who are approving pilots for utilities to procure certified gas. And really where we're seeing it happen is in the agency space. So we are seeing every Department of Environment, we're seeing departments of natural resources, we are seeing air quality control commissions, oil and gas commissions, all grappling with how they can be relevant and how they can approach this concern of methane in the environment. Why that matters for us is we don't necessarily want a patchwork of solutions. And so the more we can be in line with industry and what the producers are really trying and recognize all of that good work, and then seeing that come through in the policy, that can recognize, credit, and reward producers for taking those actions. As many of you know, we're seeing net zero goals across the span, and they all look slightly different and have different caveats. And so as producers who could produce in multiple states, this becomes more and more challenging. And so what we are really hoping to do is to advocate for the space in all of these areas, and play a role where we think it's really important. So with that, I will be happy to take questions now or later, but I would love to throw it over to Jessie.
Great. Can you flip some slides for me? Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I think, as Des mentioned, I kind of and Michelle mentioned, I represent, and Liz even, the utility side or the downstream side or the end user side for the natural gas supply chain. That's where I spent the last 15 years. And I think before I even touch on these like handful of slides we've got, I just want to bring it up one level, because I spent most of my time on the electric side, everything electrification, all kinds of electric gas utility technologies. And I came over to Project Canary and got into the gas side. And all of this stuff about methane intensity and like the upstream, midstream, downstream was very confusing for quite a few weeks. And even the idea that we call it methane intensity when really it just means it's a leak rate, right? So like I want to just kind of help some people who are like me last year and start with the biggest at the top of the funnel. The natural gas is what heats our homes and we cook with it, right? And industrial facilities use it to generate high heat for their applications, their manufacturing. And that gas is 95% methane. So when we talk about methane intensity, it's the gas that's coming into your stove and into your house. And that gas, if it's not combusted, if we don't burn it and it leaks out of the pipe, it's 80 plus times worse for the environment than carbon dioxide. So Project Canary's mission is methane for that reason, right? And the fees that Michelle talked about, these taxes that operators are going to have to pay for methane, it's because it's so bad for the environment and it's everywhere, right? We have miles and miles of gas infrastructure all over this country and really all over the world because gas is cheap. It's now everywhere. We've got all the pipeline in the ground to deliver it to your homes and to our businesses. And so when we see things like this, these sort of headlines and the pressures that Michelle talked about, it's because of that methane leak rate, right? It's that if you're not keeping the gas in the pipes, it's actually worse for the environment than burning coal, right? So the new measurement data that's coming in from satellites, from companies or profit organizations like Environmental Defense Fund are showing that our leak rates are much higher than what gets reported federally. And so this pressure extends all the way down the supply chain. And guys, did I call this? I said this was going to happen. Hold on just a second. So quick note is one of the topics we talked about before this webinar was does WENCO ever do sessions on work-life balance and working moms and all that stuff? So stay tuned, that's the next topic. We'll get back to methane for now. All right, so methane gas is everywhere. Gas infrastructure is everywhere. There's 70 million gas users in the United States on 140 million homes. So like half of the current population uses gas, and it's leaky. Right. And so this new satellite data shows that if we accept the current leak rate, we might as well burn coal. And that's why you see headlines like this. And that's where all the pressure's coming from. And that's why I think companies like ours have a legitimate role to play, helping all the organizations along that supply chain reduce their leak rate. Policy players are trying to convince legislators and regulators to really enforce mandates. Right? In order to maintain your social license to operate, you've got to adopt a zero leak policy. You have to monitor, mitigate, repair your leaks, and hawk that, because if you don't, right, like I said, it's 80 times worse for the environment than carbon dioxide. And more people are learning about it. So as that pressure increases along the supply chain, I think we'll see the gas infrastructure system get cleaned up. And where I focus is really, I would say downstream at the utilities, they're responsible for about 25% of that leak rate. And so every player has a role in this. There's monitoring upstream where Liz focuses. There's the midstream, thousands of miles of pipeline that moves gas around the country. And then there's like the utilities that distribute it to us in our homes. And then we have a role to play as well. And so this is the clean it up or shut it down. We're here to help gas infrastructure owners clean it up so that natural gas can stick around in the clean energy transition as a legitimate, clean, ubiquitous, low cost fuel. Can I do the next one, Michelle? So if you look at COP27 is going on right now, COP26 last year, a bunch of good stuff came out in the IPCC reports. Natural gas is part of every one of the pathways for the clean energy transition, right? The climate science includes natural gas for all sorts of reasons that we won't talk about today, but it's in the plan. It just has to be cleaned up. So when we talk to people, stakeholders out there who want to see electrify everything, right? Or sort of a more rapid transition to electrification, I think part of our job is to remind them that natural gas is going to be around for a few decades at least. And even according to the best climate science out there, forever, as long as we clean it up, right? And we make good use of a future hybrid gas, infrastructure where you can mix hydrogen and other fuels in there. So next one, Michelle, that is I think a little bit of history. This RSG or certified natural gas is very new. The first deal was done in 2019 with one of our customers up there in the Northeast. And today, almost 20% of the gas that flows around the country is already certified low methane. So producers have felt that pressure. They're certifying their wells. They're making the investments to reduce the leak rate, and they're getting a premium for that gas in the markets. So we're seeing differentiated gas as a new commodity now, where buyers pay a small premium, and they get to claim the benefits of carbon dioxide equivalent reductions or abatement. And that's, if you look at the next one, Michelle, I think this is a super busy slide. It's like the complete version of what she showed earlier. But one of the things we do is help end users run a cost benefit analysis. So if you pay a premium, what benefit can you claim? And then how does that cost get passed on to customers if you were to expand across the territory? So in this slide, it's just one example, but if you look in the Project Canary MMBTUs procured methane, that's the single input really. So you put in, or one of our sort of buyers or end use utility partners puts in how much gas they buy a year. And then the green bars are the methane intensity or the leak rate associated with that certified low methane gas with sort of a national average that's reported up to the EPA. And then on the far left is a sort of an extreme end of the spectrum. If the leak rate is as bad as some of these academic studies say it is, then the carbon abatement potential is really dramatic. So you can see down there 1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent abatement if just one big East Coast utility switched to RSG. And then what we do is out to the right is the electric equivalents, right? So I think this is a pretty powerful tool. Anyone that wants to do this, you can reach out to us. We do this for free just to help educate the market and help people understand what the benefits will be. I think I have one more. Do I have one more slide? Yeah. One more. I think this is the logo slide, but we have about 55 customers right now, from upstream, gathering and processing, interstate pipeline, LNG. The utilities are not our customers. Those are like, we play like a matchmaker role where the guys upstream certify their gas and continuously monitor it. The utilities and downstream buyers or local distribution companies purchase that gas. And what we do is try to help them make a match. So on the right are a bunch of utilities that have done RFIs, RFPs, pilots, are already procuring gas in meaningful ways, this differentiated cleaner gas. And then on the left is just a sampling of the customers that we have. And like I said, this really started about 4 years ago. And now you've got dozens of producers in the market, 20% of the gas across the country. And so any end use buyer, whether they run natural gas fired power plants or their utility, like a district gas distribution company, can really access the gas now. And that's an increasing volume over time. So the trend line is steady up and to the right, which is good for the planet, good for us, certainly good for Project Canary. But it's what keeps a bunch of mission focused people in our company doing the good work. So let's, yeah, I think those are all the slides that we have. There is one: who is currently requiring certifications? Is it utility companies or certain states? The buy side of the market is demanding cleaner gas. And if you just think of yourself as as a consumer, you have a choice today to pay a little bit more for wind and solar power, right? If you want to, you can offset your electrical use in your house. There's lots of retail providers that will offer you pay a little bit more and you get to say you have clean electricity for your home. This is the gas version. You pay a tiny premium. All the math that we've seen so far, when you pass that on to customers, it comes out like, if you think about your gas bill right now to your house, if you had to pay $3 more or $5 more per year, you could have clean gas, right? 100% of it could be low methane, low leak rate gas. Why wouldn't we do that? That's what we're here for. That's what Michelle goes to the legislators and the policymakers and tries to get them to understand. It's a very low cost for a huge planetary benefit. Cool. Any other questions? You guys could throw them in the chat or holler out or throw a hand up if you've got them.
I wanted to add on to Kelly's question about that idea of requiring certifications. And Jessie, you know, you touched on this. We continue to see more and more utilities to say they're looking for RSG or preferred or registry preferred, but requiring is a hard term. But we notice data points. So we notice that buyers like NG, like Uniper, like, you know, they prefer, and it's not a requirement, but they are investing in that little bit of premium or that purchase for gas that has had that third-party certification. So again, I would still be behind saying voluntary market, but we pay attention to every transaction that we know about, and it's happening on more than one side. So we think we're going to see it more in LNG. We know that Europe, a lot of those buyers have higher standards than we do ourselves, and we notice in the utility space. That's probably the trickiest part about this world in which we live. There's not a mandate that says you must. A lot of people think we're going to move to a space where, you know, it is all going to be some sort of certified gas. And if you don't, you're going to be selling at a discount. But just Jessie, didn't know if you wanted to add to that.
Actually, before we hop there, I do think that's a really important component, right? So to the answer, states are requiring air quality regulations. So as many of you know, Colorado has some really stringent air quality through Reg 7. So no one is requiring the certification yet, but what's happening is various states through their air quality control commissions or oil and gas commissions or departments of environment are slowly starting to put regulations in around air quality, reporting emissions for the EPA. The standard that Liz brought up becomes a really important piece because right now there isn't one, and there are several groups that are working towards that. So Jessie mentioned the Environmental Defense Fund. They have some information that they put out on what they believe, you know, a standard could look like. GTI Veritas is also working on a standard. NASB is working on some standard, an addendum for certified gas to their standard contract. And then we're also seeing OGMP 2.0, which is a voluntary program where producers and companies can get together and say, hey, I believe that I meet, you know, level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And where regulations I do think will end up is setting a floor. But I'll be honest, I think everyone's really struggling with what that floor should be. And there are so many pieces of technology out there, but where everyone is coalescing around is this idea of data. And so I think I got muted. I don't know.
No, you didn't.
But everyone is coalescing around is this idea of data and needing to measure and really understand what actual emissions are.
Right, so think about if you're gonna pay a
Jessie, you're
premium for
muted.
something. Am I? I don't so show myself muted.
Oh, we can't.
I can hear you.
Okay. Think about if you're gonna pay a premium for anything, like in your life, right? You want to know that it's worth it. And so if a utility is going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in gas and premiums for cleaner gas, it's understandable that they would want that to be measured data by a third party, not the producer declaring that, hey, I sent you some gas molecules and they're clean, right? So like you have a third party certified, verified, differentiated commodity, then yes, you pay a premium for it and it's on a blockchain based digital registry. It's super legit, transparent, like let's go. Right. And I think that's like the market just this year stood up, I think 2 new registries, 2 more are coming. We'll have 5 total here by the end of the year. And so all of the tools to enable the market really took off this year. You've seen, I would just get back to that question about states, like Michelle could answer this better than I can, but the 2 states that I see with buyers leading the sort of charge for cleaner gas options, we see it in initially in DC. The DC Public Service Commission went out and said, hey, utilities, go find options. Go tell me what's cleanest to bring into our state. Back in 2018-19, they did the first deals over there in the DC, Virginia area. And then more recently, though, New York, right? All of the New York legislated utilities are on various committees and commissions trying to figure out standards and calculations for carbon abatement. They've all big RFPs by Central Hudson, the New York Power Authority, Orange and Rockland has a pilot approved, Con Ed has one in with their commission now. So like New York's kind of leading in the same way they led with reforming the energy vision. We'd love to see Colorado lead in the same way. And in some ways, Xcel Energy has. Xcel is the largest, they're in 8 states, millions of customers, and they set the most public target, which is to be 100% RSG by 2030. And they're constantly increasing the volume of green gas that they procure on a monthly basis. So that's the kind of commitment we'd love to see everyone make. There's some challenges in Colorado that don't support other utilities making that move, but Xcel is definitely leading the way here for us.
Awesome. Great answers from all of you. And I'm kind of just in awe with the whole presentation. Some of the things that I picked up on was the measurement movement. Is a great phrase. I think that's definitely what we're looking at. More visibility, more ways to capture data, and that's leveraging technology to really get us there and prove that we know what we're talking about. And another thing that stood out was rewarding producers through policy. You know, a lot of the times when policies get launched, everybody gets a hand slap, but if we can reverse that mentality, get ahead of it, reward people in advance to start making those right decisions and making those changes, that's really how it's going to advance us. Just doing a quick time check here. We're almost at 1 o'clock, which we said that we would end this presentation at that time. For those of you, if you have more questions, please do put them in the chat. We'll try to keep continually answering them until we run out of time here. But if we don't get to all of them, we will respond after the session and get some answers out there, because this is a very interesting topic that's expansive. We did have a couple of questions that we came up on our own. I think for the sake of time, I'm just going to pick 3 of them. And then at the very, very end, I'm going to ask what one word means leadership to you. So think about that. We'll get to the 3 questions here. The first question I want to ask is, what is the reason for advocating for RSG? And I think
Yeah, I can start, and it's actually nice to repeat myself because it's important. It's a good, strong message that methane is 80+ times worse for the environment in terms of global warming potential. So we have to stop the leaks if we want to keep natural gas through the energy transition. And for anyone who has studied that a bit, it's very easy and fun to just be like, let's electrify everything now. but that's very expensive. Can you imagine just in your own home, if you had to convert your gas cooktop to an induction cooktop and your gas heat to electric heat, and then what that does to your utility bill, and whether or not you can afford to put panels on your roof to cover those increases in kilowatt hours? Like, it's expensive at a homeowner level, and it's expensive in every way that you extend that model. So we will electrify more and more over time, and we'll power that electrification with more and more renewables over time. But natural gas is here, cheap, available to everyone. And if we clean it up, it makes a ton of sense to use it for all the applications where we can electrify, and for sure for peak load, winter heating, and industrial applications. So I think, why RSG? Because I don't accept a 2.5% leak rate. Like, I don't accept the pollution of a coal burning plant. I don't accept it in my gas infrastructure either. And I want more people to declare that it is a good use of fossil fuels if we keep it in the pipes, right? If we make it clean.
I would simply add to that, fossil fuels are the pillars of our society. And if you look at some of the major components of our world that we use, steel, ammonia, concrete, plastics, fossil fuel plays a role in all of them. And so, like Jessie, I don't accept a world where fossil fuels go away, but I do think we have a world where fossil fuels are seen as just as valuable, just as critical, just as important, and just as clean as everything else that we're looking at. And I think being able to really recognize not only the people, the labor forces, the tax benefits, the policy benefits, those are all really important. And it's not until we look at a world of clean gas that goes right up to bat with clean solar, clean wind, batteries, nuclear, like that's why we advocate. That's why I love what I do. And that's why we advocate for RSG.
And just the last thing, I think for any of us that have been in any aspect of energy for a long time, especially coming up from the upstream, growing up in Texas, moved to Oklahoma, coming up here is a very different environment. And we tend to be in rooms where energy is so polarized. It's either you believe in transition or it's drill baby drill. And for some reason you have to pick a side. And the truth is, I don't believe it anymore, especially though, as longer as, you know, the more time I've spent on this side, there's a million shades of gray in between. And the more we can do to educate, and still, I'm very proud of my industry background, but the more we learn to do better and we actually apply that, that's really how we're going to get to these next steps in the future, and helping be that good bridge where it raises a lot of uncomfortable conversations for many, and that's okay. There have to be people okay with having hard conversations to get to where we need to be.
Absolutely. We might actually be out of time for these questions because your guys' answers are very thorough. So I appreciate the detail. Let's just go ahead and kind of wrap this up. What one word means leadership to you?
Ooh, mine would be resilience. I'm going to try not to give it a long answer, but we have so many moments where we're distracted by noise, by life, but so many other things, and we find ourselves on a little roller coaster. And I feel like you can be your own best advocate, block out the noise and stick to your guns. As my Ukrainian grandmother used to say, you know, you're strong like Ukrainian bull. She was the biggest advocate for resilience in my entire life. And I definitely feel like I have part of that, you know,
Love that.
That's it. My Ukrainian bull has come out. I'm done.
Awesome.
You want to go ahead?
Take it away, Jessie. What would be your one word?
I had a few, and it's very hard to pick for me, but I was thinking about my 12 years in the Navy and 15 years working on these big mission focused teams. And I was gonna say just integrity, but saying integrity implies that a lot of people don't have it, and I don't want to be that way. So I'm assuming that everyone has integrity. And the thing that really inspires me as a leader is when that leader is focused on the team. So actually not focused on what you're selling or building, right? But focused on the people on your team. And I have found that if you take care of the people on your team, they will get it done, whatever it is. If you're at war, if you're, you know, in a startup or a large company, right? Or we're building new products for Project Canary, like take care of the people, delegate authority out to the edges, trust them, empower them, and they'll get it done. So maybe a team focused leadership.
It's super hard to follow that answer, Jessie. I should have let
And,
Jessie.
and my accent, like what accent are you going to use in your answer?
Yeah.
Um,
Italian grandmother. Yeah.
I know, you are now the Ukrainian bull. We have a new name for Liz. I would say empathy. And what I mean by empathy, and you heard it in Jessie's answer, and you really heard it in Liz's answer too, is emotional intelligence. We are all humans and we are all balancing and juggling things. And the more you can be empathetic, you still have to be accountable. You still have to have integrity. You still have to be excellent. But having the empathy to understand what motivates your team and what motivates you personally, and then the grace to understand life, that is a leader I will follow into the fire.
Awesome answers. Awesome. Ukrainian bull. I'm not gonna forget about that.
We're canaries. I feel like we should have like a bird signal or something, you know, like I've messed up all our brand with this Ukrainian bull, but yes, thank you.
And that all the answers combined, you know, team is definitely number one. I agree. They're really going to carry you through. You got to be empathetic. You got to understand what's going on. You got to see things from another person's perspective, and you know, to have that resiliency and stand on your own. I think all of those combined in one leader is really what's going to help us get through a lot of these hurdles that we're seeing in the industry and push us forward to the next level. So I really appreciate all of your guys' answers and your time. This was a very impactful session. I'm glad we're recording it. We're going to be able to capture it in our archive. And those of you who want access to it, we'll be happy to send it out. Yeah, cheers to you, powerful women leading this industry and taking us to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Have a great day.
Bye.